Hey everyone, welcome to your first tutorial of the second semester. And today we are getting into databases for the first time. So this is the demo. This is where we want to get at, a very simple application. It's an application that stores random names in a very simple database. So before I show you what we want to do on the application, let me just show you the database. So in SQL Management Studio, I've gone ahead and created a database called Random Names. It's a very simple database. You can see it only consists of one table. The table's name is name, and that table comprises of a ID column, which is an integer, and a string column or varchar 200 column. Okay, so if we just right click and select top 1000 rows, we can see that currently there are 6 records with 6 names. These names are just any random text. At the moment I've just got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in there, but obviously it can be anything. This is just for demonstration purposes. Right, so back to our application. So what I want us to create today, MVC web application interacting with a database. So we're not going to be reading any data today. I want us to focus on, in this tutorial, I'll just be focusing on insert, update, and delete interactions with the database. So when we click on generate new, then it goes to the insert page, and we can type any value in there, some name, and when we click add, then it says success, 1 row added. When we go to update, we can go and provide the ID and go and provide a new name. So we update record number 6 to the name Jared. Okay, and when we save, it says success, 1 row updated. Finally, when we click on delete, it navigates to the delete page, and here we simply provide an ID and we say 6. We can say 1 delete, and say success, 1 row deleted. When we go back to the database and we execute again, then we see record number 1 has been deleted, an additional record has been added, some name, and record number 6, Jared, has been updated. It used to be the text 6, this has been updated. Okay, so that's where we want to be. So I'm just going to close the demo. In order to keep this tutorial short, I've gone ahead and already created all the HTML pages, because this is nothing new to you. You already understand how to go about creating HTML. So you can use the template MVC project that Visual Studio provides for you and just modify it so that it looks like this. So I already have all the pages, the insert, the update, and the delete. So all we have to go and do is essentially the background code. Okay, so for that I'm just going to jump into the Visual Studio. I'm going to stop running, and here we are. So as you can see, our index.cs.html, so our razor has already been created, and it links to our insert page, which has a name text box, our update page, which has an ID and a name, our delete page, which only has an ID, and our controller, which already has action results to load the insert, update, and delete pages. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with insert. So when we go to insert, just to remind you, let me run quickly just to show you. When we go to insert, what we want to do is type out a name, and when we click add, then the Razor page needs to make a call to the controller, and the controller then needs to store that name into the database. So the code behind this add button just doesn't exist yet. So let me close here. So if we go to the insert page, this is a name text box, and it says that if we look at the HTML.begin form, it says it's going to call a do insert action. Right, so we need to go to the home controller and go and add a do insert action. Okay, so we go public action result do insert. Okay, and this action result will expect a name to be passed through, and when we are done, we are actually going to return back to the index page. Return view. We're going to return to the index page. Okay, you'll remember from the lecture that in order to do a database interactions, there's a series of steps that need to be followed, but the first thing that you need to do is to actually create a connection with the database. Now, so it's in essence like a pipe between the database and the C# program. Now, because we're going to actually reuse this connection over and over and over again throughout our program, it is a good convention to not create the connection and make the connection string within a particular action, but to actually make it globally available. So just one, I want to show you a tip. You don't have to do this, but it's a good idea to actually go and create a globals class. So I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call it globals, and we add, and I'm going to make this class global static. This means, if you recall from the first semester, that an instance cannot be created of the globals class. The class itself is an instance. So, and then inside of that, I'm going to create a public static string that I'm going to call connection string. Public static string that I'm going to call connection string, and I'm going to assign a value to that. Now, a connection string, when you're trying to create a pipe between your C# program and your database, your C# program needs to know the address of that database. Where in the world, on what server in the world is this database residing? Okay, so you'd have to type in some type of string, some type of address there, but it has a very particular format that you need to type it in. Now I'm going to show you a quick way that you don't have to remember the format of the string. I'm going to show you a quick way that you can actually find the string in order to connect to our random names database. So you go at the top here, you go to tools, you see there's a connect to database. You click on that. Now we know our server at the moment is, normally this would be an IP address, but because our database server is running on localhost on the same machine that our C# program is running, we can just go ahead and type in a period, which essentially means localhost. Down here you will see that a drop-down menu comes available, and this shows all the different databases that you have in your database server. And one of those would be the database that I created for this tutorial, random names. When you click on that, and you can test your connection, and there we have our test connection succeeded. Okay, when I go ahead and click on advanced, then right here at the bottom there's a box with a string. Now if I copy that string that is your connection string. I can copy that, cancel, cancel. I never ever created the actual connection, and I just copied that string and I come and paste that in here. So here you can see the format of the string is you have to provide a data source, which is your where the server sits. Then you've got initial catalog, which is the name of your database, and then you've got integrated security, which is just a security setting that I'm not going to get into at the moment. Okay, so now inside of that globals, static globals class, you've got your connection string. And wherever you need to make a connection to the database throughout your entire application, you can refer back to this string to do so. Okay, now back to our home controller. As I've mentioned, we're going to not only do an insert, but we're probably going to have a do update and a do delete. So for that reason, I'm not going to create an SQL connection inside of this action, but I'm going to create it outside as a private member of the home controller class. So I'm going to say private SQL connection. That is the class that you use in order to create the pipe between C# and a SQL Server database. But now you can see that it's actually complaining about it. It shows a little red squiggly line. So if you hover over it and you hit Control period, then it suggests using system.data.sql client. Okay, so what we should be doing in order to use that class, we need to import system.data.sql client. When we do that, then it knows what this SQL connection. So that's SQL client is a library that has a whole bunch of classes and utilities that we can use in order when we want to interact with the SQL Server database. Then we just need to go and give a name to our connection, and we say, okay, SQL connection, my connection equals, we create a new instance of the SQL connection, and we can already provide the address of that connection by accessing our globals.connection string. And there we go. Now we've got a connection. So when we go back to our do insert, we now want to use that pipe to actually execute a command. So because any interaction with a database means you are actually interacting with a third-party piece of software, and you don't always have control over that piece of software, you open yourself up to lots of exceptions. For example, if for some reason the database server is switched off, meaning it's not accepting any external connections, then your program is going to bomb out. So it's very important that you apply safety measures so that your program doesn't fall in on itself. So the way you do that is to make use of try catches. So when you enter try and you tab twice, then it actually inserts a code snippet. So let me just show that to you again. You type out try and you tab twice, and there you have the format of a try catch. Okay, so then what this basically says is that if I have any exception, so if for some reason the code that I execute within this try block doesn't work, then and an exception is thrown, then this code will execute. And what I want to do is to actually put a message in my view bag so that the front end can actually display that message, and we want to add to that view bag the errors message. Okay, so just to show you what will happen if this code executes, remember we return the index view. So in the index we've got razor that says if the view bag has a message, then it should display that message. Otherwise, it should display these elements. So if this code executes, then a message will be loaded into the view bag, in which case it will be displayed on the home page. Right, so let's get to the code. Now that we've got a pipe between our database and our C# program, we need to send an instruction to the database, and that you achieve by creating a SQL command, which also uses the system.data.sql client library. So I'm going to call it my command, and you instantiate a new command. Now the command takes a string. So here you type in pure SQL. So in this case we want to insert into what's our table name? It's called name. And then we go values and right. And we also put in our connection. So at the moment what this SQL will insert, it will essentially insert a empty string into the name field of the name table. So let's just go back to our database. Remember our name table inside of our random names database has an ID and it has a name field. The ID, however, is auto increment. So if we look at the properties here, its identity is set to true, and its identity seed is set to 1, and identity increment is set to 1. This essentially means, you'll remember from your INF 214 class, that with every time a new record is added, it will automatically increment the ID. It will generate the ID, and that ID will be 1 more than the previous record in the database. Okay. Essentially what we are doing is writing in our C# is to very simply just write a query. So we can just as well say that we're doing this. Remember, we created a connection in our C# to use the random names. I just want to show you the equivalent of what we're doing in our C#. I want to show you in SQL itself. So we're doing insert into name values. Name is just a whatever. Okay, let me just execute that. Then it says 1 row affected, and when I go select top 1000, then you'll see whatever has been added there. Okay, so we want to do exactly that. We just want to do it from our Visual Studio, from our C# program. The difference is, however, we don't want to type in here whatever. We actually want to provide a variable name that comes from the front end. But we luckily have that variable that comes through, so all we have to do is add it into our string as such. So here we have our command. All we have to do now is to execute our command. But as you will remember from the lecture, you cannot send a command to a closed connection. You must first open your connection with a database. Why is that? Well, only one place in your program can send a command to your database. Once a connection is open from your do insert action and you keep that connection open, then other places can't access the database. So you need to continuously open a connection, send a command, close that connection. Open a connection, send a command, close the connection. Okay, so we start by myConnection.open, and then we can execute our command, myCommand.execute. Now there's multiple different executes that you find here. You have execute scalar, execute reader async, execute reader not asynchronous, execute non-query, and we want to do the execute non-query. Why is that? Because we are doing an insert. We are not querying the database, we are sending data to the database. So whenever you've got an insert or an update or a delete, you will do execute non-query. Okay. Now, what we actually want to do is, you will recall from the demo, we actually want to send a message back to on the front end that says how many records have been added. Okay. In other words, we need to change the view, we need to add a viewback.message as well. The execute non-query returns an integer, and that integer returns the number of rows that were affected in the database. So we can actually use that when we want to create this message. So we say viewback.message equals success space the number of rows that were affected, and then we just add it. Okay, and that will, if you recall correctly, on the home page, if you've got a message inside viewback, then it will display the message. Okay, there's one thing that we haven't done yet, and that's to close the connection. Okay, but let's say we open a connection, we execute the query, but anything goes wrong. If anything goes wrong, then it will go into the catch and execute this code. But if we only put the myConnection.close inside of the catch, inside of the try, and it bombs out on this line, so if we did this, and it bombs out when we try to execute, then the close will never be called. So there's one of two things we can do here. We can either copy this line of code and also put it inside of the catch, but that's duplication of effort, and remember, we want to keep our code dry, don't repeat yourself. So there's something else that we can do. We can actually add a third clause to the try catch, which is called finally, and this says no matter what happens in try and catch, this code will always end by doing this by running this snippet. So if we put our myConnection.close in that snippet, then we are sure that after this piece of code runs, that your connection will always be closed. Okay, let's save and run and see if our code actually works. Okay, so we click on, we've done the insert, so we say generate new, we type in test, and when we add, then here we have it, success, one row added. Very good. Now all we have to go and do is the update and the delete, and all we need to do is be lazy and copy and paste them and just go and modify. So let's quickly do update. What does the update receive? The update, you have a ID as well as a string that comes through, and all we have to do now is to actually go and change this SQL. So we go update name set name. So update the table, set the column equal to the name that comes through here. So we update the name column to be equal to the variable that comes through, where our ID equals the ID that comes through. Okay, so if we simply copied everything from our insert and we just change the SQL, then we're basically ready. Now lastly, we just need to do a delete. Okay, and what the delete expects is a ID. So we will provide the ID, and then the code needs to go ahead and delete the record where that ID is equal to the ID that comes through. Okay, so delete from the name table where our ID equals the ID that comes through here. And let's just change our messages. Success, X number of rows deleted. Success, X number of rows updated. Okay, so let's go and test our code. I think we're done. We click on update. So we can provide an ID. So we say ID 5. Let's go and update. Let's quickly go and check what is ID 5 at the moment. It's a text 5. Okay, so if we say updated text and we click save, success, one row updated. If we execute this again, then you can see that ID number 5 has been updated to updated text. Right, last thing to test is just our delete. So we can go and put there ID number 2 and we click delete. It says success, one row deleted. It used to be ID number 2 set 2. When we execute this again, then that that value isn't there anymore. So there we go. That's your tutorial for this week. We'll carry on next week where we actually do a read from the database and display records that are in the database in your web application. Till next time, thank you very much. Bye.